Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Three Nails Information Security podcast. I am founder Vincent Mentz, joined by our guest, Bill Harmer, today, who is operating partner and CISO at Craft Ventures. In my short experience of meeting Bill, he's been incredibly insightful and a chatty Cathy. So I'm excited for the podcast today, Bill. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. Thanks for having me, Vince. My name is Bill Harmer. I am the operating partner and CISO at Craft Ventures. I've been with the company for about 3 years. And in that capacity, primary responsibility is to do vCISO services to my portfolio companies. And I also do technical due diligence on pre-investment in the cyber world. So I can see all the new stuff that's coming out. I also do in-house security. I am the CISO for David Sachs, Jeff Fleur, and Craft Ventures. I've been doing security for 27 years. I've been in the IT business for 30 plus. I've been doing startups for 27 years. The world of security when I started was non-existent. It was literally, we built what we had to survive. I started on the internet in the porn industry with adult content. We were being regularly attacked for our content, not the money, even though we were doing 20 million ARR back then. Been through some startups, had some exits. I was with DocSpace in the early 2000s. We sold that to Critical Path for 700 million. I went on to join SuccessFactors pre-IPO and then post-acquisition by SAP for 3.4 billion. I became the head of security and the global privacy officer for the cloud division of SAP. Went to Zscaler. I was the Americas CISO for Zscaler pre-IPO. Went on to SecureAuth, where I was the CISO and CIO, and now I'm at Craft Ventures.
Incredible experience.
Thank you.
Large enterprise.
It's been a fun ride. Yeah.
Yeah.
Build it, break it, fix it. That's my world.
I love it. I think it's going to be interesting to hear, some of your experience coming from large enterprise. I think most of the topics today will be surrounding, mid-market, SMBs and things. So with your level of expertise, I think that we'll be able to glean some great knowledge. So, as far as like security concerns go, what do you feel like some of the biggest security challenges that SMBs are facing and that are often overlooked? And why are those areas sort of critical to their long-term security?
I'll sum it up with a small story that I have about this. I was doing a volunteer thing for a buddy of mine that works at PG&E here in the city. And he had said, look, we do this thing where we will segment off part of our budget for a small, medium business. And would you come in and talk to them about security? Just because they have no access to somebody like me typically. These are literally 2-3 people shops, mom and pop, partners, that kind of thing. And so I said, yeah, I'd love to. It's a huge part of the economy out there is the small, medium business. And they are just not typically as regulated, nor do they have the expertise, or even they don't know the questions to ask. So I went in and I was at Zscaler at the time. So I took one of my Zscaler presentations on transformation because I was trying to teach enterprise how to move to the future. And it was really interesting because I took some things out that were very enterprise focused, but I left the majority of it in. And I did my presentation and I felt really good about it. And this lady in the front row said, could I ask a question? I said, please do. She goes, what in God's name do I do now? And I realized she was terrified. Like I had just scared the life out of her with what is out there. And I think that's the issue with small, medium businesses. They don't typically know what to ask because they tend to be experts in the field, whether it's, a flower shop or if it's an accounting practice or something. So they're experts in those unique things. And to be good at security, you need to think like a criminal, which hopefully most of these small, medium businesses are not thinking like criminals. So it's not, to them, they're not thinking somebody would attack me. Why would they attack me? And there are a whole variety of reasons why they would. And I think what we're seeing, at least in the security industry, or soon we'll start to see a little bit more in the security industry, is what happened in the software industry back in 2000s. 2000s was the decade where we democratized software, right? So you would, as I was at SuccessFactors, we were providing HR software to all businesses, but it was typical. It was something that was typically only available in like an SAP R3 on-prem installation, which cost millions of dollars. So Salesforce did it to the ERP world. SuccessFactors did it to the HR world. And we've seen that on and on. How do you create specificity and expertise in an application, but without all the overhead and need that you find in running it, building it, maintaining it, being taken care of in the SaaS world? You just simply log in and use it. So I think what we're starting to see, and I'm hopeful that it's going to continue, is the same thing for security. If you look at like a Palo Alto or a Zscaler, like Prisma or Zscaler, those are big enterprise grade mobile security applications. Good way to describe them, I guess. So refuse to use the term SASE because it's just stupid. But so they require a team. They have some care and feeding. There's stuff that has to be done. It is not just click and forget. But then you can now see a company like Kite Cyber is coming up, and they are literally bringing out, I'd say, like 80% of what a Prisma or a Zscaler would do. And for small medium business, that's more than enough. That's like, it's like the good parts of Excel without all the stuff behind it that nobody uses anyways. So they're bringing those tools out, which are very simple to implement, very straightforward to configure, and a one person could run it very simply, very easily. MSPs again could also run it. I think they literally built their infrastructure to work with an MSP from the ground up, because MSPs are a really good thing for this. I'd go closer to the medium business. Medium businesses can really, really benefit from MSPs. And then the small ones, again, MSP might be too expensive for them, might be too much for them. But a tool that the owner of a company can go in and go, okay, I'm going to click and use, kind of like TurboTax, right? You used to have an accounting firm that did it. Now you can go in and you can do your own unless you get super complex. Same thing on the security side.
Yeah, I think that speaks to like some of the practicalities. Can you think of any other sort of practicalities companies with like smaller budgets can do to increase their defense? I mean, the
Yeah.
defenses, especially with some of the upcoming, threats, the ransomware groups, which seem to be targeting more SMBs, probably because they're easier to compromise.
Yeah, absolutely.
Uh, yeah.
I would say first and foremost, password managers, right? That is the cheapest, easiest solution that you can give employees. So if you're like a small shop, 8, 10 people, even 50, roll out a password manager, because what you can do, and you can encourage and explain to your employees why this works. Um, if they use that for everything, right? So maybe they have a one password, that's my password manager of choice, and they've got 2 vaults in there. One's work vault, one's home vault. They can put all their passwords in there. You're paying for it. If they leave the company for any reason, they don't lose their passwords. You just simply disconnect them from payment, and then they just have to pay the whatever, $8, $12 a month, whatever it is. But at that point, if you can encourage them to be using randomized passwords, and they don't have to be massively complex. NIST has come out and said like super complex passwords are just a pain in the ass. People are writing them down, they're forgetting them, it's becoming difficult, and that you should do multi-factor authentication. Google Authenticator is free. A password manager, you can set it to, pick it something simple, 12, 14 characters, and use passphrases, something that you can remember if you want. That makes it easy. You don't always have to go back to your vault, but it's there. But it allows them to do a unique password for everything that they sign up for, because the password replay attacks are what kill them, right? You go out and you've got an employee and they've got access maybe to your instance of Salesforce or your instance of Monday or whatever you're using, and they use the same, and this is how people think. We can hold 3 things in our head at once. And so what we do is we tend to do the super secret password. That's our bank, right? That'll be our bank accounts and stuff like that. We'll do a secret password. That's going to be work. And then we'll do the throwaway password that we know hits the complexity. Because I don't know if you've ever done it, but you're trying all sorts of passwords. No, you're not hitting complexity. You don't have this. You don't have that. But password with a capital P, 1, 2, 3, and an exclamation hits complexity, which just blows my mind, right? Like we force so much complexity that we force it back into mediocrity. But for instance, you go to Zappos and you want to get some shoes and it says create an account and you get a 10% discount. Well, okay, I'll create an account and I'll put my throwaway password in there. But my throwaway password is probably a variation of my work password because I'm trying to
Mm,
remember it. And that's why
mhm.
these password managers, at least they're creating unique ones for everyone. Dial down the complexity, take the complexity out for all I care. Do a 12 character passphrase. You could even type it yourself if you want. Just pick four 3-letter words, put spaces between them. That's great for entropy. That's great for complexity, and throw two-factor authentication on it. And you are secure enough. I'm not going to say you're secure totally, but you're secure
Mhm.
enough that hopefully the threat actors go to somebody else that doesn't have that stuff. And then that way, when your employee gets compromised on Zappos because they get popped, the database gets pulled and decrypted, and they're doing password replay attacks because they Google the user's email address and find out that they work at company XYZ. Now it's an attack. It's really simple. So that you want to just sort of go down that path.
Love that. I think, as it relates to my next question, something you've spoken about is consistency and accountability in cybersecurity practices. And I'm reading a really neat book that a phrase comes to mind that talks about how your destination is determined by the direction you're headed. And so, as obvious as that seems, um, and it does sort of relate here too, because I think as far as consistency goes, you're only going to continually stepping up if you continue to work on your security. So yeah, password manager is sort of the fundamental thing, and as you take more time and invest more resources over the years, you're only going to strengthen your security posture. So how can smaller businesses ensure they have reliable security measures that don't really fluctuate over time?
So
Um,
one of the interesting things you'll find with small medium business, in that 50, 60, 80 person group is whoever runs the company, the security measures don't apply to them. That becomes the first problem, right? So there's no consistency. Um, you have to be consistent in your approach, and I think I told you this before. The way I look at it, it's like a golf game. If you got a slice in your game, you see it, you understand it, you can play the slice, right? You can understand where that's going to come in, and sometimes it's a benefit to you, sometimes it's not, but you can adjust for it. But if you are randomly just hitting the ball all over the place, like if you've got no destination, you've got no way to get there, no way consistently to get there. So I think with the smaller medium businesses, not taking on too much. Like, you got a 50-person company and you're rolling out CrowdStrike. Like really? Um, I think there's better choices you can make
mm,
to centralize things and just create a uniform approach. And always remember, this is about usability, right? Security is 50% usability. If it's not usable, your users find ways around it. And if you're a small, medium business, you've got no way to find that out, right? You're not going to be
mm,
having it. You're not going to have, you're not going to be running like some sort of nudge or something to find out what apps they're signing up for. Those are things that are going to go for a larger organization. Maybe you will run nudge. Maybe I don't know. But if you're making it too complex and too arduous, right? And we're seeing this even on the 2FA side, right? How many people have two-factor fatigue, where everything has two-factor on it? Exactly. And that's where it's becoming a little like, if we get rid of passwords altogether, life would be so much better.
mm.
If we could base authorization and authentication on behavior, um, but then you have that little bit of big brother on the background because you're going to have to watch everything that happens and know if there's deviation from norm. And I think that goes beyond small, medium businesses. So I think you can look at your small, medium businesses and start to say, okay, what's important to me? What can I not? If you know what you can't survive, you know where you can start to look, right? If you are an accounting practice, you cannot survive a compromise of your client's information. At least I don't think you can. That's about the worst thing that could happen. If your printers went down, all right, you got to put it on a thumb drive and run it over to Kinko's. If your internet access goes down, you can still operate in person. But if you lose your customers' data, you can't file their taxes. You can't return them. So if they get encrypted, what are you going to do? An accounting firm is going to have to look at some sort of disaster recovery solution and test it. So many people create DR plans, run their backups, and never test them. And when the when the disaster happens, they realize it's going to take way longer than expected, or they just don't work the way they expected.
What are some of the sort of like if you were advising an SMB, what would be some of the things that you would prioritize saying like these are the must haves, start here, or I think that a lot of SMBs tend to have difficulty identifying really what they should invest in with such a saturated market of tools
Yeah.
and accessible knowledge. Like it's such a challenge. What would you advise?
I go after the core principles, right? And this is an SMB is no different than a startup. Um, Actually, it's different in the sense that they actually have a product. Startups don't tend to have a product, um, but it's the
Right.
same sort of concept. Why are you investing in security if there's no product? So with an SMB,
Hmm.
look at the core principles of user accounts, right? User account management. Make sure that you're onboarding and offboarding your users correctly and efficiently. You're not just sort of going back and looking at it later or randomly. Um, you can use some of the guidelines that you see in the cyber insurance policies that are being utilized, though they tend to be paint everything with a single brush because that's how underwriters work. Um, so, for instance, they would say 2FA on everything, and if you have two-factor on, the cafeteria menu, it's kind of dopey. Doesn't make sense, and you're going to over-engineer your solution. But I think look at user accounts, look at the core crown jewels of the company, right? Ask yourself what it is you do and what can you not afford to lose, and begin there, because that'll be different for everybody, right? Like I said, if you have a flower shop, um, probably one of the things you want to look at is your supply chain, right? Could you be affected by your supply chain? Because if you don't get flowers delivered, you got no product to sell. And I assume you're not growing them in house. You're simply doing the arrangements and the delivery and all that other stuff. So you got to look at your supply chain and understand where the potential impacts are there. I don't think you're going to see a very advanced threat go after a local flower shop, but they could go after a chain, right? And that's what happened when you saw the car dealership software that went down, that just wiped out. Everybody was trying to do sales from paper. Um, so that's sort of where I would look as a small medium business, is really at the core critical pieces. How do I operate without digital access sales, right? Your point of sale system. If you can get some malware in there to lock up your point of sale system, you can't make sales. Can you call in the credit cards? Can you do cash? Because some companies don't do cash anymore. On the small side. In the medium side, definitely looking at the core of the business and understanding what it is it can survive, and then adjusting that appropriately. There is no one solution to anything. Identity is the one I think that spans all of them, because we are all meat sacks that need to have a digital fingerprint somewhere. So you can sort of go with core competencies on identity, and then after you start going into that, you're going to be looking at what your business does.
Offline we talked a lot, and I think one topic that you really sort of blew my mind in a couple areas with was just referring to data sort of as the currency for today's age. As it relates to just our previous conversation, would data come into this discussion at all? I mean, obviously it's like some companies like a flower shop, really what data is there, but um,
Well, think about data, right? If you've got a flower shop, you've got a customer database, and if you're good, you're maybe noting birthdays and sending out notices
hmm,
saying 10% discount for the upcoming birthday. Get your
good
wife some
point.
flower. Like, I mean, that's how you generate more business. So for them, data is important. If they lost everything at a flower shop from a data perspective, I think they would be fine. They may not have the added sales, or they may not have the ramp that they're looking for. It may stall or plateau them for a little bit until they rebuilt the customer database. But I think there's still an importance there. Flip that over to the accounting side. So a small accounting firm, that data is massively important. That is their business. The skills that are being brought in for accountants are being democratized through services that are automated, right? So your TurboTaxes, or whatever else you've got out there, that are creating these. Like, how many times do you now do your taxes where it says you can talk to a CPA, and unless you're doing something odd, Like if you're just a regular person doing regular taxes, you don't need to talk to a CPA. Click, 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 follow the online CPA. So to them, data is massively important. In fact, a little bit more so than the skill sets that are being brought by the CPAs because of these tools that are automating it, which really, I mean, that leads right into the AI world and the whole belief that AI was going to smoke the labor jobs, and it is not going to happen. Not first, it is going to smoke the skilled job, the knowledge worker, way faster than it will take on the. If you think about AI, it's like AI is the brain. It's going to
Mhm.
go after the thought workers and the knowledge workers before it goes after the arms and legs. The arms and legs are still needed to actually do the jobs. But yeah, so I think if you sort of look at data just in general, even companies that aren't consciously a data company, car company, um, a small widget maker, right? You know, somebody who makes phone cases. They are data companies in the grander scheme because they're going to have those again the customer databases. They're going to have the market data on the phone cases that they make versus the other ones that somebody else makes. The comparisons. They're going to want to make them cheaper, better, stronger materials. They're going to want to source better. Again, third party. So you've got supply chain attacks in there. And you just have to look at what it is again that you can survive, and ask yourself that very clearly. Like, if I turned off this, do I still make money? Because that's what the threat actors are after. They're after the money. And again, for anybody who's thinking, well, you know, nation state, I'm not even talking about nation state. Nation state does not come into this, and a small medium business is not going to survive nation state. If the North Koreans want to go after a small medium business, go home. They'll own you. They just have unlimited resources. All of the nation states have the ability to throw more money at it than it is worth, and that's the difference, right? You are not going to throw more money at your defense than your product is worth. If you make $1 million a year selling flowers, you are not going to spend $2.5 million defending it, right? There's just no point. And that is where you start to balance this out. You start to look at the
Mm.
cost of the defense versus what it is you're defending. If I have even a division, say I'm looking at a larger organization, and I'm looking at a particular threat that's coming in that's going to threaten my um, uh, go back to the widget maker phone case. So it's going to come in and it's going to threaten my phone cases for Apple, right? So Apple makes some phone cases, and there's a threat to that particular division. They look at the revenue on the phone cases. Okay, we make pick a number. We make $1 million a year on phone cases, and I can reduce that threat, which is we'll say it's a very prevalent threat, and there's a high probability that I could lose 60% of my revenue. All right, so now our target is $600,000. And I come in and say, look, I have a solution. It's going to cost me $80,000 annually to reduce that threat. I'll be reducing that threat from 60% to 10%. So I'm potentially protecting $500,000 by spending 80. That makes sense, right? And that's how you have to start doing this. There's too much of well, we have a threat. We have to stop the threat. Well, why do we have to stop the threat? Right? What is it? What is the threat going to do to us? And then what is it we are going to, where will we be on the other side once we have mitigated that threat? And if we've mitigated it successfully and we can move on, great. Are we still making money? Has it dug too much into our profit? Yes, no. All questions you ask yourself. Great part about a small medium business is a small team that's doing it, right? You can have a small group of people that very much understand what their business is. Larger enterprise, it's a little bit more difficult because you have somebody in a particular department, and this is where we end up with what we call siloed security, because security is its own department. It is not eyes across the organization. I shouldn't say most, there are security leaders that do not understand how they make money, or they understand
Mm.
the idea of how they make money because they understand, but they do not understand each division, each department, how it works, how it contributes to the overall health financially of the company, and then how do you apply security to it across the board. So in the small medium, I think, when you have an owner operator, or even just a CEO for a medium sized business, you can look at the company and say, all right, here's where majority of our revenue comes from, or here's where the majority of our product comes from, which generates the revenue, or how services, however you look at it.
I'd even advocate that one way to identify like, I guess, potential impact, or like what is valuable is, I think in terms of my experiences, like during penetration tests, right? If you can demonstrate that you can hack the flower company's, I don't know, their flower sorting server or something really
Yeah.
meaningless. That's one thing. But if you can demonstrate that you can get onto their point of sale and then compromise the point of sale, like, I think it's interesting to be able to identify like what is actually valuable, where impact would actually become true impact versus theoretical impact. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not, I'm not delivering reports saying we could do this, rather demonstrating this was done and this is what theoretically would happen, like, because I got here. So
Yeah. And one of the things to remember with that is the interconnectivity of all of this stuff, right? This is where people start to forget, because then they say, okay, well, Bill said, go look at the flower sorting server, right? Because that is where we bring in our inventory and we allocate and blah blah blah. So we're going to protect that, and then we're going to maybe not protect this other server over here that does the lunch menu. But that lunch menu is open to the internet, and you have interconnectivity between them, and that is the microsegmentation that is not being done is the problem, and that goes all the way back to Target, right?
Yeah.
Target had 80 million credit cards walk out the front door from the point of sale system because Fazio Mechanical Services was compromised, and all they were doing was taking care of air conditioning units, remote monitoring of air conditioning and HVAC in the stores. But on the back end, for sort of ease of use of the administrators and stuff, they were all connected through a single back end network. That was the mistake, right? They did not look at it and say, okay, how are we protecting our point of sale? They were protecting it from just that direct attack. They weren't looking at what happens if leap, leap, leap. And that's the part that'll get you. And that's why I say with passwords, home users' personal passwords will affect you. Home user personal networks can affect you. If you're still running VPNs, every endpoint that you have a VPN connected to, and if you're running split tunneling VPNs, I mean, you might as well just put a big sign up that says "Come in the back door."
Bill,
But that's why you got to
with
think like a criminal.
Yeah. I love it. Is there any frameworks that you want to recommend that SMBs can adhere to, and maybe like leave us with one or two questions they can ask themselves to just kind of get the journey rolling or progressing, from where they're at?
Yeah, I would pretty much what I say is go grab the security and the privacy if you need it, but I think grab the privacy anyway. Security and privacy disciplines from the SOC 2. That is the floor. That is not the ceiling, right? Let me be very clear. Too many people right now are using it as I'm SOC 2 certified, so I'm good. No, you're not. You've done the bare minimum that keep you out of court. Now let's start going from that point on about what is important to your business. But I think a small, medium business at least read through them. And they don't even have to go get SOC 2 certified if they don't want to. If it's not necessary, if they're not getting pushback from their customers or something like that, then don't have the audit done. But there is absolutely nothing wrong with an alignment, right? So you can get an ISO alignment, you can get a SOC 2 alignment. I like the SOC 2 alignment just because it's a little bit more common sense for a small, medium business.
Thank you, Bill. Really appreciate that.
Yeah.
How can people sort of contact you after this podcast? You feel like LinkedIn is the best way to reach out if anybody has any thoughts or questions?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn under William Harmer. LinkedIn, I have a verified account, so I have to use my legal name from my driver's license. Bill with one L. There's a story behind that. Usually costs a beer to get the answer. I've actually found 4 other Bills in the world. One's a comedian in Vegas. But yeah, you can get me on LinkedIn under William Harmer. You can get me on Twitter, or X as the kids call it today, under Wilharm3.
Okay.
But yeah. And I've got my own website, willharm3.com.
All right, so I'm saying the CTF, the capture the flag, for anybody listening, is to go get the story behind Bill's name and bring it to me, and you'll get a free pen test. No.
There you go.
No, I appreciate your time today, Bill. Thank you for sharing your expertise and speaking to the smaller fish and sharing your knowledge. It's been awesome having you on. So
My pleasure. And thanks for having me, because the small medium business truly is the lifeblood of the country, and we need to start ramping up and protecting them.
Fully agree. Thank you again, Bill.